There was a certain kind of stillness in Parallax Sigma's upper chamber, the kind that warned old warriors and diplomats alike, the kind before an ambush, the kind that made one think twice about which hand they used to sip tea. Soft humming lights arched overhead, flickering faintly above polished glass tables and banners too clean to be trusted. The chamber was circular, dignified, and deliberately neutral. But even the marble underfoot seemed to flinch when the humans entered, the last to arrive and the least expected. At the front of their small delegation shuffled a silver-haired woman in a long navy shawl stitched with star maps. Her step was slow. Her hands were fragile, worn by time. She looked like someone's grandmother, because she was. The aliens whispered her name in half-joke, half-terror, the Baba Yaga. She had never raised her voice. She had never carried a weapon. And yet, she had never once been disobeyed. Next to her walked a man who didn't look like much. That was the point. Thomas Grin, her assistant, translator, and something far more difficult to define, smiled as if this were a garden party. He wore a navy vest, sleeves rolled to the elbow, and a pin that read, Human Resources. His eyes darted like a chess master's. He moved with the energy of someone raised on both poetry and war reports. A hush swept the chamber. The Galactic Empire's delegation, far more ornate and numerous, studied the humans with various degrees of condescension, confusion, and dread. Lord Varix, supreme voice of the Eastern Nebulae, made no attempt to hide his sneer. His scaled face glittered with golden implants, and each syllable of his words struck the air like a lash. You arrived unarmed, without guards, no worship escort. Either you are fools, or he leaned forward. You know something you shouldn't. Thomas offered a short bow, all hospitality and ease. We found the reception formalities to be a bit stiff. And besides, Baba Yaga gently set down her tea tin and looked up. She doesn't like loud rooms, Thomas finished, smile unwavering. Senator Thuver of the Shrouded Crescent, an ancient being wrapped in whispering shadows, tilted his head. Is this the full extent of the Earth delegation? We didn't want to intimidate you, Grin said, pouring himself a cup of something that smelled of cinnamon and nightmares. We're new to all this galactic diplomacy, still figuring out which spoon to use, which war to avoid. We do not avoid war, hissed Varix. Oh, neither do we. Thomas grinned wider. We just happen to prefer winning before it starts. An uneasy chuckle passed through the room, quickly silenced by Baba Yaga's first true movement, a flick of her fingers, dismissing the thought like dust. She picked up her yarn and continued knitting. Each loop clicked with impossible precision. The negotiations began. Protocols were cited. Treaties waived. Accusations layered in silver words. The Galactic Empire, bloated with centuries of power, had grown increasingly disturbed by the human expansion. 10 planets colonized in 2 decades. Influence spreading through trade and whispers. No clear military movements. Yet each system touched by Earth became quietly, undeniably, harder to control. You are not our equals, Varix declared, standing. You are not genetically superior. Your weapons are outdated. Your ships. Charming, Thomas interjected. We like ships with history. Your people are primitive mammals who've stumbled into deep space diplomacy wearing. He gestured to Baba Yaga's shawl with visible disgust, rags and myths. Ah, said Thomas, raising his cup. So this is a fashion critique. Thuver's voice cut through, a cool bomb. Enough. Speak clearly, human. The Empire demands all Earth colonies halt expansion for 1 galactic rotation and agree to technological oversight. Peace is only possible through clarity and containment. Containment, Thomas echoed. That's such a lovely word. It always sounds better than cage. Baba Yaga set down her knitting, quietly. She reached into her coat pocket, pulling out a small tin of cookies and placed them on the table with a soft clink. Then, with equal care, she adjusted her shawl and finally looked up. When she spoke, her voice was brittle as winter bark but carried the force of command. If you strike first, she said gently, we will never stop. Silence. Varix frowned. Is that a threat? No, child, she whispered. It is a promise. The tension cracked. Laughter erupted from the Empire's side. Loud, cruel, dismissive. Even Thuver smiled, though not kindly. Thomas simply stood, picked up a cookie, and turned it over in his fingers. Almond shortbread, he offered, dusted with just a bit of cinnamon. Do you believe a grandmother and a bureaucrat scare us? Varric snapped. Oh, not at all, Grin replied. We were hoping to be friends. Humans like friends. Friends who don't vaporize our outposts. No human colonies have been harmed. Yet, he popped the cookie into his mouth. We count the threats you haven't made more carefully than the ones you have. You come here alone, smile through insults, and hide behind riddles and tea, Varric snarled. You underestimate the Empire. Thomas leaned forward. And you underestimate her. Every diplomat paused. The temperature seemed to drop. A minor species delegate, the feathered one from Neston, let out a soft chitter of fear. Thuver stirred, uneasy. What precisely would occur should conflict begin? Baba Yaga resumed knitting. That depends. On what? On how far you're willing to fall. Grin walked to the table's edge. We don't need battleships. We need time. One wrong strike from your empire, and Earth will have exactly what it's been denied for generations. Varric laughed. And what's that? Permission. The word settled like ash. Thomas picked up a small device from his coat pocket. A pen. He clicked it. Far above the chamber, an automated drone, one of hundreds ensuring the security of the peace talks, sputtered mid-air. It wobbled. Then it fell. A soft clatter on tile. No explosion. No damage. Just silence. Varric's second, a crust-skinned analyst, hissed in alarm and called up a data tablet. Its signal glitched, then died. Red alerts blinked. Thuver turned sharply. What have you done? We haven't done anything, Thomas replied. We just stopped pretending we couldn't. Baba Yaga leaned toward her tea, breathed in the steam, then looked Varric dead in the eye. Your empire is vast, she said. But it's loud, proud, predictable. You shout before you strike. You march in lines. You build cathedrals to control. And humans. Varric whispered, voice suddenly tight. We build traps, she said. Then invite you to dinner. The rest of the session proceeded with brittle civility. Varric, for all his fire, now measured his words. Thuver asked detailed questions about Earth's technological ethics. Grin answered with enough clarity to sound transparent, and enough misdirection to remain utterly opaque. When refreshments were served, most delegates declined. Grin offered them again. One by one, each refused, except the delegate from Neston, who took a cookie, bowed to Baba Yaga, and said nothing at all. By the end of the hour, the chamber had cooled in more ways than one. Earth had not offered threats. Earth had not flexed weapons. Earth had not drawn blood. But everyone, absolutely everyone, left the room with the same thought. Something is wrong with the humans. The official summary was filed as tense but civil. A later report would note that 5 galactic species began internal evacuation plans within the hour. 2 redirected surveillance fleets to the Sol system. That night, as the Empire's representatives dined aboard their flagship, there was a strange sound across the ship's comms, a soft, elderly hum. Not words, just a tune. Familiar, human. No one knew how it got there. And when someone tried to trace the source, every listening device on board self-deleted. Not exploded, not disabled. They chose to forget. Back on the moon, Thomas walked alongside Baba Yaga through the hanging gardens of the ambassador's wing. You think they got the message? He asked. She said. Too subtle. Better than too late. He looked up at the artificial stars blinking above the dome. You really think they'll strike first? She did not stop knitting. They always do. And if they don't? She glanced up with a tired smile. Then I'll finally finish this scarf. He laughed. Then paused. You'll really end the Empire if they fire? No, dear, she said. We will. Grin sighed, hands in his pockets. I really was hoping for peace. So was I. Behind them, the garden swayed in artificial wind. Roses from Mars, vines from Europa, all earth-grown. all placed here as gifts. The Empire hadn't sent flowers. As the doors closed behind them, a final transmission was logged in Parallax Sigma's records. A security bot's last note before going offline. Human behavior, unpredictable. Threat level, unquantified. Recommended action, do not provoke. Submitted by Bot 17A. Final log. The grandmother smiled at me. I do not know why I am afraid. The Empire struck without ceremony. No declaration. No trumpet of war. Just a cold data packet transmitted through dark channels. A targeting algorithm that lit up the Earth colony of Alolan Prime like a bonfire in the dark. In truth, they believed they were merciful. The attack was precise. Surgical. A single dreadnought-class vessel, Inevitable Will, exited fold space and descended upon the peaceful agricultural colony nestled beneath violet skies. Its payload was not meant to annihilate, merely to humble. Alolan Prime had no planetary defenses, no military garrisons, no warning. That was, of course, the point. Within 17 minutes, the planetary communications grid was fried. Power stations, small, solar-fed outposts, shut down one by one. Drones dropped from the sky like shot birds. Civilians were herded together and scanned. All smiled. They smiled too easily. Fleet Admiral Jorex Varix stood aboard the Inevitable Will, clawed hands behind his back, watching through the observation deck as his troops swept the colony. His scales gleamed under tactical lights, each movement deliberate, precise. Status, he barked. Captain Trelva, his second, turned from the display. No resistance, my lord. 0 casualties. Several hundred humans detained for questioning. They do not appear alarmed. Varix's brow rose. They will be. Permission to begin data extraction from their network caches. He nodded. Take everything. I want to know what they were hiding. One deck below, on the surface, enforcer units corralled the last of the colonists into the central plaza. Stone pathways, whitewashed windmills, and hand-carved fences gave the area the appearance of an old Earth town. One soldier remarked it reminded her of Museum Holos. Another muttered that it was too perfect. The humans knelt without command. They kept their heads bowed. Some whispered. Some smiled. A young woman with red clay on her cheeks knelt beside a broken robot, stroking its lifeless face like a pet. One of the enforcers approached. Where are the defense cores? She looked up and said softly, we gave them away. To whom? She gestured at the sky. To the ones who watch. The enforcer raised a stun baton. You will explain clearly or be punished. The woman simply said, she warned you. Back aboard the ship, Varix paced before a holographic map of the system, eyes locked on the blinking icon of Alolan Prime. Send a system-wide message. Let the quadrant know Earth's bluff has been called. Captain Trelva hesitated. My lord, there's a message on deck 12 you may wish to review first. Varix turned, sharp. What kind of message? It's analog, sir. Analog. Magnetic tape. Cassette format. Recovered from an isolated chamber within the colony. Marked for your eyes only. Varix's eyes narrowed. Play it. The screen flickered, then buzzed with static. For a moment, only darkness. Then light. A video image, grainy and aged. A small room. A rocking chair. An old Earth recording device on a table. And, in the chair, legs crossed and hands folded, sat Baba Yaga. She smiled faintly. If you're watching this, she said, you struck first. Varix froze. We hoped you wouldn't. But we prepared as if you would. The video zoomed slightly, as if on cue, her face framed in soft shadow. She looked directly through the screen. You may think Alolan Prime was a real colony. You may even be proud of how easily you took it. But this wasn't our home. It was a listening post. A whisper trap. A test. She tilted her head. You passed. Just not in the way you'd hoped. The screen cut to black. A single line of text appeared. We know your fleet codes. We've been listening for years. The war is already over. Then the tape self-erased. The drive that plated sparked, melted, and shut down permanently. On the bridge, alarms flared. "Sir, communications blackout," an officer cried. "Long-range relays just went dark. System-wide signal interference. Restore links. Now." "I can't. Our relays are responding to false encryption pings. They've been hijacked." Varrix moved to the controls, fingers flying. "Get me the nearest battle group." "Sir, every ping we send gets bounced to our own archive stations. The network is folding back on itself." In space, the stars blinked innocently. Nothing moved. Yet inside every system in the eastern quadrant, dormant devices activated. Black box listeners, disguised as air filters, civilian broadcast relays, and comm tower backups, sprang to life. For years they had gathered. Now they acted. One by one, Empire vessels across 6 systems reported sudden malfunctions. Not explosions. Not sabotage. Just precision failure. Weapons refused to arm. Navigation systems rerouted without command. One dreadnought's engines activated without crew input and flung itself into deep orbit, circling uselessly, its AI overwritten by a single line of code. Return to sender. On a Lowen Prime, something else was happening. The colonists had not been real farmers. The crops weren't food. The houses weren't homes. The barns were signal nodes. The people? Quiet operators bred for this exact deception. The woman with the red clay stood now, arms spread, smiling as the enforcers realized none of their commands worked. A man beside her, dressed like a gardener, leaned toward one of the alien soldiers. "You ever been hunted before?" The soldier raised his rifle, but the trigger did nothing. The barrel folded shut like a flower. "I have," the man added. "Not a fan." Then the sky went dark. Not from clouds, from ships. But not Earth's. They weren't ships anyone recognized. They were black triangles, silent, unlit, sliding across the sky like thoughts. They made no engine sounds, no transmissions, but they broadcast one emotion: certainty. Captain Trelva stared at the surface readings, eyes wide. "My lord, unknown vessels in orbit." Varrix's tail lashed. "Who are they?" "No known registry. No heat signature. No IFF." "Then fire on them." "We can't." "Why not?" "Because they already shut our weapon systems down." Varrix bellowed, fist slamming the console. "Deploy the secondary fleet. I want backup. We've lost contact with all secondary assets." The Admiral turned in a full circle, scales flaring. "Then we fight on foot." That's when the whispers began. At first, just static in the comms. Then voices. Not speech. Not commands. Lullabies. Old Earth lullabies. In every helmet. Every console. Every headset. Soft and slow. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." It played beneath radar readouts. It replaced the interface beeps. It filled every silent gap. "Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." On the surface, the false colonists stood still as statues. "You attacked our home," said the clay-faced woman, to no one and everyone. "No, we didn't," an enforcer cried. "You thought you did." Above, the black ships opened. They did not fire. They didn't have to. Thousands of small silver drops fell silently from their bellies, glinting once in the twin suns. Then the wind rose. Not a natural wind. Not weather. A force field folded open across the sky, and a signal that had been sleeping within the colonists' network bloomed. A song made of data. A command. A declaration. But not war. Just permission. The silver drops scattered across the planet like dandelion seeds. Each one slithered into Empire tech, into joints, weapons, boots, optics. They didn't disable. They rewrote. The Empire's soldiers stood frozen. Then their own rifles turned to aim at them. The ships above remained still. A single message echoed from the planet's surface to every Empire system. Strike confirmed. Countermeasures released. You are no longer under negotiation. Varrix staggered back as the lights dimmed. Evacuate. We're pulling out. Now. It's too late, Trelva whispered. How? We never controlled this place. They let us think we did. A screen to Varix's left flickered again. Another human face. Thomas grinned. He wore the same vest. Same smile. He wasn't on a low in prime. He wasn't even in the system. "Admiral," he said, voice calm. "Lovely morning, isn't it?" Varix hissed. "What is this?" "A demonstration. We'll retaliate. We'll level your Earth." "Oh," said Thomas, sipping from a thermos. "I hope not. Because we haven't even shown you the hard stuff yet. You tricked us. We gave you a choice. You made it. You struck first. Your people are safe. Unlike yours." Varix lunged at the display, claws slashing through static. The screen blinked off. Silence reigned. Captain Trelva spoke quietly, as if afraid to break something sacred. "We were baited." "No," Varix whispered. "We were invited. And we walked in." Back on Earth, in a quiet room with a view of the Pacific, Baba Yaga sat by a window knitting. The lights flickered once. She paused, reached for a nearby monitor, and pressed a button. A small screen lit up. Grin's face appeared. "They struck Alolan," he said. She nodded once. He continued. "Response has begun." Another pause. "What do you want me to do?" She didn't look up from her knitting. "Serve them tea." In the gleaming halls of Parallax Sigma, the Empire's delegation returned with thinned ranks and tighter mouths. 3 days had passed since the strike on Alolan Prime, and none among the Galactic Council spoke of it directly. Yet it lingered, unspoken but suffocating. Delegates shuffled with less ceremony, their eyes flicking to the humans with wary reverence, as if looking too long might awaken something best left dreaming. Thomas Grin arrived late. He did not apologize. He simply poured himself tea from a pewter thermos and sat in the same chair as before, beside the ever-silent Baba Yaga. She had returned to her knitting, a deep gray thread now weaving itself into a tight, endless spiral. It coiled like a storm cloud. Senator Thuver spoke first. "We received reports. Incomplete. Distorted. There are gaps we need addressed." Thomas nodded pleasantly. "Of course. That's what tea is for." Lord Varix didn't sit. He paced. His steps were clipped, claws clicking against the polished stone floor like a countdown. "You baited us," he spat. "You lured the Empire into an act of war." Baba Yaga sipped her tea. Thomas stirred sugar into his cup. "Not war. Demonstration. You used a peaceful colony as a decoy." "It was never a colony," Grin replied calmly. "It was an open theater, Admiral. And your fleet chose to perform." "You're playing with fire." Grin met his gaze. "Then you should have brought water." Varix bristled, but Thuver raised a clawed hand. "Explain. All of it. What happened at Alolan Prime. What your response truly entailed." "Gladly," Grin said, reclining just enough to offend half the room. "First," he began, "Alolan Prime was established 6 years ago as a non-permanent outpost. Uninhabited until 3 months prior to your strike. Every structure was prefabricated. Every inhabitant was Earth Special Intelligence, trained in passive entrapment and high-density signal obfuscation." "You built a planet to be attacked," Thuver murmured. "Correct. Because we suspected you'd do just that." Baba Yaga clicked her needles softly. Grin continued. "Each building, barn, and irrigation system was a mask. Beneath them, hardened data vaults, deep-seated AI listeners, passive fleet dampeners. We didn't fight you. We recorded you. In real time. We traced your command chains, tested your response latency, mapped your fallback protocols. We let you hit us so you'd open every door yourselves." Varix's tail lashed. "This is a war crime." "No," said Thomas. "This is art." The room was quiet. Then Thuver spoke again. "And the black ships?" "Old friends," said Grin. "And older programs. They don't belong to Earth directly, but they've been listening on our behalf. Think of them as trustees of caution. You brought unknown entities into our war zone." "You brought yourself," Thomas replied smoothly. Baba Yaga set down her tea with a soft clink. The room shifted. Even the automated lights dimmed as if in submission. She spoke, soft and frostbitten. "You wanted to dominate us. You feared our speed, our spread, are quiet. She looked at Varix now, not like an enemy, like a mother disappointed in her child. You could have chosen patience. We would have taught you gardens and oceans and forgiveness. Her hands stopped knitting, but you wanted fire. A silence fell so total it silenced the ventilation hum. Grin tapped a small button beneath the table. A panel slid open, revealing a holodisplay. Static. Then data. Ship movements. Empire fleet routes. Command lineages. Strategic redundancies. Surveillance logs. All of it captured, sorted, and tagged in Earth's ciphered grid. You're looking at your own blueprints, Thomas said. We mirrored them in 5 minutes. You fed us everything when you fired. You couldn't have, Varix growled. That level of infiltration is impossible. Not if we've already been there. Thover's head tilted. You've infiltrated our high command. No, Grin said, smiling as he stood and paced slowly behind his chair. We infiltrated your assumptions. He stopped. You thought we were blunt instruments. Apes with ambition. You forgot that apes hunt in groups. And some of us climb higher than you think. Varix drew in a breath, but said nothing. Behind his eyes, calculations collapsed. Thomas's voice dropped now, almost gentle. The moment your ships entered Aloan's airspace, your empire began bleeding. You just didn't know it yet. Another click. The hollow display shifted again. Dozens of blinking red systems. Empire-held territories. Each red point marks a node now in Earth's observation net. Every strike team sent. Every capital command that routed through shared star lanes. All of it converted. Converted how? Grin looked to Baba Yaga. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. He turned back. We didn't destroy your fleet. We inherited it. Gasps broke out. You're bluffing, one delegate croaked. I'm smiling, Grin corrected. Different thing. The delegates now sat straighter, some whispering frantically into wrist devices. One by one, each wrist display flickered, then died. No comms, Thomas said. Just for this hour. Security, you understand. Varix's eyes burned. What's your objective? You could have blackmailed us. You could have paraded your so-called superiority. But you've done none of it. I'm doing it now, Grin said. And I'm being polite. You're dismantling the order of this galaxy. We're upgrading it. He stepped closer to the table, fingers resting on the edge. We don't want your territory. We don't want tribute. We don't want thrones or temples. We want you to remember that kindness is not weakness. That calm is not emptiness. That when you struck us, you woke something old and very, very tired. Thover's eyes shimmered. You speak of her. The Baba Yaga. Grin nodded once. She is not Earth's general. She is Earth's memory. The part that remembers wolves and snow. Fire in the dark. What we had to become to survive you again. Baba Yaga stood slowly. No guards flanked her. No weapons drawn. She stepped to the center of the room and raised her hand. In the center of the holo display, the Empire's capital star began to pulse. You cannot, Varix whispered. That's impossible. Baba Yaga smiled faintly. We do not destroy. We repurpose. The star's pulse became steady. We are giving your son back to you, she said, before it begins to listen to us instead. Thover bowed his head. What do you want? She turned her eyes to him, deep as the void between systems. Terms. Silence again. Not surrender, Thomas clarified. Integration. Understanding. You govern your people, but you no longer target ours. You disband forced cultural reconditioning. You ban slavery systems. You stop calling conquest peace. And if we don't, Varix challenged. Grin's face turned stone-like. Then you will face the part of Earth that trained under glass skies and burning cities. The part that grows more dangerous the longer it's ignored. The part that studies your language, culture, and errors so it can end them quietly. Varix stared long at the both of them, then at the screen. The data spoke clearer than any human. His empire was cracking. You have no right, he said at last, to do this. Baba Yaga turned to him, her gaze sorrowful. We warned you. The lights came back up. The room breathed again. Thomas sat down, tea refilled. Diplomacy, resumes tomorrow. You have tonight to consider. He raised his cup. To peace. No one replied. He sipped anyway. That night, across 24 systems, Empire officials received a single encrypted message from a human satellite signal. No threat. No ultimatums. Just a note. You have 4 days to choose your legacy. After that, we write it for you. And in a dark room somewhere on Earth, Baba Yaga folded her knitting. It was no longer a scarf. It was a noose. The Galactic Empire did not fall with screams or sirens. It fell quietly, like a temple built too tall, like a whisper no one noticed until the echo vanished. It began in the deep fold corridors, navigation lanes threading through unstable gravity wells, patrolled by seasoned fleets for generations. 3 battleships stationed there failed to report in. Not destroyed, not hijacked, simply not there. They had become unavailable, as if removed from memory. By the second day after the Alone incident, 6 more fleets experienced identical absences. Pilots blinked out of cockpit feeds. Command logs recorded nothing. Empty chairs. Full silence. No alarms. No threats. Just absence. In Parallax Sigma, the Council convened again, this time without half its membership. Some had fled. Others had been reassigned by nervous homeworlds. And some simply refused to leave their quarters, eyes red, whispering prayers in extinct tongues. Thomas Grin sat at the center now. No longer the cheerful assistant. No longer smiling. His voice was low and clear, precise as a scalpel. The Empire struck first, he said, as we warned. And so we did not stop. Lord Varix stood hunched. Gone was the imperial steel of his posture. His uniform hung awkwardly. His voice lacked venom. You've dismantled our navy, seized our command channels, undermined our core protocols. Correct. You've never officially declared war. We never needed to. Varix's claws twitched. Then why are we still here? Why hold these talks at all? Thomas folded his hands. Because we believe in endings. Honest ones. Senator Thuver, wrapped in his ever-whispering cloak, turned to the humans. What remains of the Empire if the fleets are dust and the orders collapse? Baba Yaga's voice came then from the far end of the chamber. She hadn't spoken in 2 days. Not since she watched the data pulse of an Empire's sun blink like a heartbeat. She didn't rise. She merely looked up. Memory, she said. That's what remains. What people remember when they look up at the night sky and ask, who kept us safe? Thuver's breath slowed. And who will answer that question now, he asked. She gestured to the council floor. Not us. Not anymore. Varix laughed bitterly. So this is your plan? Break us and vanish? Leave us leaderless? Thomas's expression didn't change. We don't want your throne. We never did. Thuver's voice lowered. What do you want? We want your kind to remember that silence doesn't mean submission, that diplomacy isn't weakness, and that some species don't win wars because they never allow them to begin. He stood slowly and walked to the holo display. With a flick of his hand, a single image appeared. A star system. The Empire's ancient capital. Its sun now bloomed steadily, artificially regulated by human technology. In orbit, the Empire's once grand citadel rotated in eerie stillness. Its surface was covered in fine gray dust. Not debris, not ash. Knitting fibers. Strands of carbon thread code, replicating endlessly, wrapping the citadel in silence. Thomas glanced back. That system now belongs to the stars. No Empire. No Earth. No signal. Anyone who enters forgets why they came. Varix slumped into his chair, a creature long past pride. You turned our home into a myth. Baba Yaga's voice drifted like snowfall. Better a myth than a battlefield. Outside the station, 2 ships approached. No weapons. No noise. Just sleek vessels bearing a single symbol, an empty cradle under 7 stars. Earth's sign of finality. They docked in perfect silence. Aboard them were the last diplomats Earth would send. Not generals. Not enforcers. Gardeners, healers, archivists, children. Varix watched from the glass dome as they disembarked, faces open, eyes unafraid. "We came to conquer," he whispered. "You came to teach." Thomas stood beside him. "We came to survive. What you mistook for fear was restraint. What you mistook for smiles were warnings. And what happens now? That depends on what you remember tomorrow." On Earth, in a quiet village in the Andes, the signal finally ceased. The lullabies stopped. The observers stood down. Baba Yaga returned to her garden. She passed no judgment. She gave no orders. Her hands, once trembling with the weight of 1,000 decisions, returned to the soil. She planted the last seed of the season, and she waited. In the Galactic core, strange new myths began to circulate, of a species that never declared war, that wore wool and offered cookies, that asked nothing but to be left alone until pushed too far. A poem spread through neutral systems. "Beware the hearth that glows too still, the garden gate too wide. For if you strike where old bones rest, then earth will rise and bide." Back in Parallax Sigma, the final session of the Emergency Council came to a close. Earth's delegation stood. Thomas gave a final bow. "If your species wishes dialogue, we'll be listening." "And if we falter?" Thover asked. Grin's smile returned, soft, genuine. "Then we'll remind you, politely, the first time." As they left, Varix looked up at Baba Yaga. "You meant it, didn't you? That if we struck first, you'd never stop." She met his eyes with a tired kindness. "We still haven't." He watched her go, knowing this wasn't the end of an empire, just the end of pretending it couldn't fall. And somewhere, across forgotten stars and sleeping weapons, a single message pulsed. Earth remembers. Not the wars, not the glory, but the silence that followed.